A photograph, cracked and faded, shows a group of Japanese pilots gathered around a crude sketch of a radar screen. They are smiling, some openly laughing, as if mocking the very device that should have spelled doom for their missions. Yet, archival radio intercepts, fragmented, garbled, capture a chilling contrast. Frantic American voices calling out coordinates as dozens of enemy aircraft vanish into thin air. How could a technology that inspired ridicule turn into a nightmare? What secret flaw turned the US radar from a shield into a trap for its own pilots? In late 1941, as the Pacific War ignited, Japanese naval aviators openly dismissed the US radar's primitive displays. According to memoirs of a squadron commander, the screens showed blips too slow, too inaccurate, like watching ghosts stumble. Mitsubishi engineers, tasked with electronic warfare, intercepted reports describing the radar as obsolete, unable to track the speed and agility of Zero fighters. A tattered blueprint from a US destroyer's radar array lies beside a weathered map of the Pacific Theater, hinting at a hidden vulnerability in the system's coverage. Was this complacency born from underestimating the enemy's technological edge, or was there a deeper miscalculation at play? The radar's design was, on paper, revolutionary. Pulse transmissions at 200 megahertz, capable of detecting aircraft up to 100 miles away. Yet, it suffered from critical weaknesses: long refresh cycles, blind spots caused by ship, superstructure interference, and a frustrating inability to distinguish friend from foe. A faded technical diagram reveals a glaring blind zone directly ahead of vessels, a gap exploited relentlessly by Japanese pilots. The radar operator's logbooks, ink-smeared and hastily written, recount moments when blips vanished just as Zero fighters dove in for attack runs. How did these technical shortcomings escape notice amid the feverish pace of wartime innovation? On April 18, 1942, during a reconnaissance mission over the Aleutian Islands, the U.S. Navy's VF-17 squadron faced its first brutal test. Despite radar warnings, over 20 aircraft were lost in a single engagement. A grainy film reel, recovered decades later, shows silhouettes diving from clouds just beyond radar range. Pilots' debriefs describe the radar's false positives and missed contacts with disbelief. Expectations of early warning gave way to a grim reality. Their eyes in the sky were often blind. Why did command persist in trusting a system that repeatedly failed to deliver? Was this a failure of technology or of human judgment? In response, the Navy scrambled to adapt. New training manuals emphasized radar operator vigilance, and fighter tactics shifted to exploit radar coverage gaps. A recently declassified instruction leaflet, stained with coffee and age, outlines maneuvers designed to bait Japanese pilots into exposing their approach. Radar stations underwent hurried upgrades, adding higher frequency bands and improved signal processing. Yet, intercepted Japanese communications reveal their pilots adapted in turn, developing low-altitude attack profiles and electronic countermeasures. How much of this cat-and-mouse game was anticipated by U.S. strategists? Were these countermeasures too little, too late? By mid-1943, the tide shifted dramatically. The initial radar confidence gave way to crisis as losses mounted. A top-secret protocol, marked restricted, details emergency measures, rerouting patrol flights, integrating radar data with new sonar and visual spotter systems, and deploying decoy signals. A color-coded map of the Pacific Theater shows red zones where radar was ineffective, correlating with heavy aircraft losses. American engineers worked feverishly to close these gaps, but resource constraints and enemy ingenuity slowed progress. What internal conflicts and decisions determined the pace of this technological arms race? How close did the U.S. Navy come to losing control of the skies? Each episode is a document I pull from the dust of the archives. Share your own stories. Many of you have relatives who lived through that time, and your words help connect personal memory with archival evidence. Stay curious. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode tomorrow. As 1943 waned, a disturbing pattern emerged in battle reports. Japanese pilots were exploiting a flaw no one had fully grasped: the radar's signal processing delay. A confidential memo from a radar technician, scrawled in pencil and tucked inside a forgotten folder, reveals that the system's pulse repetition frequency caused echoes to blur when targets approached at low altitude and high speed. A faded photo shows a radar console with flickering green blips, some merging into indistinct shapes. This delay allowed enemy aircraft to slip through detection windows, appearing only moments before attack. How was this fundamental limitation overlooked despite repeated frontline warnings? Did bureaucratic inertia obscure the radar's true effectiveness? Meanwhile, intercepted Japanese pilot logs, meticulously preserved in a vault, describe their evolving tactics with unsettling clarity. They deliberately flew shadow runs along the periphery of radar coverage, timing their approach to coincide with the radar's refresh cycles. A hand-drawn map, annotated with flight paths and timing notes, surfaces from these records, showing routes weaving through radar dead zones. The pilot's laughter now carried a darker edge, mocking not just the hardware, but the operators who trusted it blindly. What did the radar operators hear but fail to interpret? Was there a breakdown in communication between those gathering data and those making strategic decisions? In response, the U.S. Navy initiated Project Horizon, a covert program aiming to redesign radar interfaces and improve data fusion with visual reconnaissance. A rare photograph captures engineers crowded around a prototype display, replacing oscilloscopes with early cathode ray tubes intended to sharpen target resolution. Yet, archival cables indicate that these innovations were hampered by production delays and high attrition rates among trained radar personnel. The pressure to field improvements clashed with the realities of war. Could technological refinement outpace the enemy's adaptive tactics? Or was the battle over radar supremacy already slipping beyond American control? Compounding the crisis, a series of intercepted communications from Japanese intelligence suggested that they had gained insights into U.S. radar frequencies and operating procedures. A decrypted message, partially redacted, references frequency hopping and jamming windows, implying an early form of electronic warfare. A grainy photo of a clandestine workshop shows Japanese technicians assembling rudimentary jamming devices. How thoroughly had the U.S. underestimated the enemy's capacity to counter their technological edge? Was the radar's vulnerability a product of flawed engineering or a testament to a sophisticated adversary's cunning? Under mounting losses, American commanders ordered a tactical shift, combining radar data with aggressive fighter sweeps and enhanced anti-aircraft artillery coordination. A tactical map, marked with red and blue arrows, illustrates newly defined kill zones, where radar coverage was supplemented by overlapping visual patrols. Despite these efforts, intercepted battle chatter reveals a grim truth. Japanese pilots continued to exploit every gap, turning the radar's promise into a deadly game of shadows. What lessons were being learned too late, and what price was paid for underestimating the enemy's resolve and ingenuity? In early 1944, a classified report from a radar squadron commander exposed a chilling reality. Despite upgrades and tactical adjustments, radar operators were often overwhelmed by a flood of false positives: seabirds, weather anomalies, even friendly aircraft, cluttering the screens. A series of blurred photographs taken from a ship's radar room reveal overlapping blips, indistinguishable from hostile contacts. Operators reported fatigue and confusion, their warnings sometimes dismissed as errors. Meanwhile, Japanese pilots exploited this saturation, timing their attacks during peak noise periods. How could a system designed to give clarity instead sow chaos? Did this overload stem from flawed design or the fog of war itself? Simultaneously, an intercepted Japanese pilot diary details their growing confidence in electronic deception techniques. Pilots describe using chaff, thin strips of metal foil, to create phantom targets on radar scopes. A faded photograph shows a Zero releasing a cascade of these strips, shimmering like silver rain against the Pacific sky. This rudimentary jamming turned radar screens into mirrors of illusion, masking real approaches with false echoes. A secret directive found in U.S. archives orders immediate investigation into counterchaff tactics, suggesting the threat was both recognized and feared. How effective was this electronic subterfuge in tipping the scales of air combat? Could radar ever recover its edge once infiltrated by deception? The most harrowing episode unfolded during the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944. Radar picket ships were assigned to detect incoming Japanese air raids, yet dozens of American fighters were caught unprepared, victims of sudden, low-altitude assaults. A declassified radar log, stained and barely legible, records multiple blip losses, moments before kamikaze strikes devastated the fleet. Survivors' testimonies recount a terrifying silence where radar should have screamed warnings. A tactical map, overlaying radar coverage with attack vectors, reveals glaring gaps exploited with deadly precision. How did these failures occur within a supposedly integrated defense network? Was the radar's promise fundamentally broken or simply outmatched by desperation and resolve? In response, an emergency summit convened radar engineers, intelligence officers, and fleet commanders. A heavily annotated transcript of this meeting, marked top secret, lays bare internal disputes. Some argued for rapid technological overhaul, others for revised tactics, emphasizing pilot intuition over electronic data. Among the documents, a worn schematic proposes integrating radar with emerging airborne early warning systems, a concept nascent but promising. Yet resource constraints and ongoing combat operations delayed implementation. Could this internal discord have cost precious time and lives? Did the war's urgency blind leaders to the need for radical change? Concurrently, a series of intercepted Japanese communications reveal a psychological edge gained from radar's failures. Pilots taunted American crews, confident in their ability to ghost past defenses. A propaganda leaflet, crudely printed but widely circulated among Japanese airmen, depicted radar screens shattered by Zero silhouettes. This morale boost translated into aggressive tactics that further strained U.S. defenses. Behind the scenes, American analysts grappled with the gulf between technology and human factors. Was this confrontation between machine and mind the true battleground? And how long could radar's vulnerabilities coexist with trust in its infallibility? By late 1944, the cumulative toll of radar failures had forced a radical pivot in U.S. naval strategy. A confidential operational order, stamped with urgency and secrecy, mandated the integration of radar data with visual spotting from new aircraft carriers equipped with advanced lookout posts. A striking photograph captures a dawn scene. Silhouetted sailors scanning the horizon through binoculars, their faces etched with tension beneath the glow of radar consoles humming in the background. This hybrid approach aimed to compensate for radar's blind spots and signal delays, blending human intuition with electronic detection. Yet, archival communications reveal friction. Many radar operators felt sidelined, their warnings discounted when visual reports contradicted the screens. How could trust be restored between man and machine when both had repeatedly failed each other? Amid these tensions, Japanese pilots refined their low-level penetration tactics, capitalizing on terrain and weather to slip beneath radar coverage. A recently uncovered tactical map, annotated in Japanese, details coordinated flight paths weaving through cloud cover and mountainous regions around Leyte Gulf. Reconnaissance photos show dense fog banks and rugged coastlines that radar struggled to penetrate. Intercepted radio chatter boasts of invisibility to the enemy's electronic eyes, reinforcing pilot morale. This mastery of environmental exploitation raised troubling questions. Was radar technology inherently limited by geography? And did planners underestimate the enemy's ability to weaponize nature itself? Desperation bred innovation. Engineers accelerated development of the SCR-729, a portable radar designed for forward deployment on small vessels and shore stations. A technical manual, dog-eared and annotated in multiple hands, describes its improved frequency agility and faster sweep rates. Photographs from a remote island base show technicians assembling the unit under harsh conditions, surrounded by tangled cables and makeshift shelters. Early field reports suggest successes in detecting low-flying aircraft previously missed by shipborne radar. Yet logistical challenges, supply shortages, training deficits, hampered widespread adoption. Could these incremental advances have turned the tide if deployed sooner? Or were they too little, too late, against an adaptive foe? Meanwhile, coded intelligence intercepted from Japanese command hinted at growing concerns about the U.S. radar's improving resilience. A decrypted message mentions countermeasures and efforts to develop new jamming devices. An eerie photo shows a clandestine workshop cluttered with experimental radio gear, wires sprawling like metallic vines. The electronic duel had escalated into a shadow war beneath the waves of the Pacific. How deeply had this contest shaped the outcomes of air battles, and what unseen battles raged within the frequencies beyond human sight? Against this backdrop, a fleet captain's log entry, dated November 1944, captures a moment of grim reflection. Radar once mocked now commands respect, though its whispers still betray us. The line, written in shaky script amid reports of mounting losses, encapsulates the uneasy truce between reliance and doubt. It left commanders to wrestle with a haunting dilemma. Could technology ever be fully trusted in the chaos of combat, or was it merely another variable in a deadly game shaped by human cunning and error? In the final months of the war, as the U.S. Navy pressed closer to Japan's home islands, radar technology had evolved into a double-edged sword. A classified after-action report from February 1945 reveals a sobering statistic. Despite vast improvements, over 300 American aircraft were lost during radar-guided interceptions, many due to the very confidence the technology inspired. A stark photograph shows burned-out wreckage scattered across a Pacific atoll, ghostly reminders of pilots who flew into traps born from radar over-reliance. Meanwhile, intercepted documents from Japanese command reveal a grudging respect for the electronic adversary, acknowledging that while their pilots once mocked the radar, it had become a formidable obstacle, one that forced them into increasingly desperate and costly tactics. Why did a tool once derided become the instrument of such devastating losses? Was it the weaponization of overconfidence or an inevitable price of technological warfare? As the final air battles raged, a synthesis of human skill and electronic innovation emerged. Radar. Operators learned to question their screens, cross-referencing data with visual confirmation. Pilots adapted by flying unpredictable patterns. Commanders embraced flexible tactics over rigid doctrines. A faded map from a joint operations center, covered in pins and hastily drawn routes, illustrates this evolving interplay, a fragile balance between trust and skepticism. The laughter of Japanese pilots at the radar's infancy had long since faded, replaced by a grim recognition of its deadly precision. Yet, the radar's story remained incomplete, marked by blind spots, misjudgments, and the relentless push-pull of enemy adaptation. In the end, the saga of how Japanese pilots laughed at the U.S. radar only to face hundreds of downed aircraft is a testament to the brutal lessons of war, that technology alone cannot guarantee victory, and that every advantage carries hidden costs. Behind every blip on the screen was a human life caught between faith in innovation and the unpredictable chaos of battle. What the archives whisper through broken intercepts and faded photographs is this: in the shadowed skies of the Pacific, the radar was both a beacon and a curse, forever entwined with the fate of those who dared to trust it.